Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
And welcome to the Shoot Room. Can you tell people who you are and what you do?
Yep. So I'm Amy Whight, and I'm the head of impact and advocacy at Oxygen House.
That is an awesome job title. What does it mean?
I wish I knew, to be honest.
Well, life's an adventure, right?
To figure it out, yeah. It's a new role which we're still developing, but I think what I'm slowly carving it into is basically anything that is thinking about people and planet and how we can prioritize that in every single business decision, whether it be in our operations or the way that we provide services.
Awesome. Can you tell us how we got here? Can you give us your sort of life and career contents page? What are the key chapters that have led you to be here?
Oh no, it's a wiggly road. So
they're the interesting ones.
All right. So I was raised in a musical household. My whole family are classical musicians. And I think until coming up to 18, I thought I was going to be a classical musician too. And then it got to someone coming into my school and giving a really inspirational talk about how they'd just spent a year abroad in Namibia as a gap year. It's the first time I'd ever heard of a gap year even existing. And they had this incredible time living out there and doing some social work. And how, I don't know, they were just basically it was a life-changing experience for them. And I came away thinking, God, that is what I need to do. Not necessarily.
So this was sixth form when you saw this?
Sixth form, yeah. And so everything changed from there. My mum remembers me literally coming back from school that day going, I'm not going to be a musician, I'm running away to Latin America. And I did. So when I was 18, moved to Peru, and that was insane. It was just, one of those.
How did you make that a thing?
So there was a really, really awesome charity based up in Scotland, in the Hebrides, called Project Trust. And they're based on the Isle of Coll. And so they have this whole adventure philosophy, which is, so they provide gap years to children who are fresh out of school, who might not know what they want to do at university or where life's taking them, but they give them an experience which will help inform and shape their view of the world, and then that might help them with their next steps, essentially. And they help you organise gap years all over the world. But the first thing they do is they test your resilience. So before you can even get selected onto one of these gap year, I'll call it a course, you have to travel all the way up from wherever you are. So I was born and raised in London, up to the Isle of Coll. And of course, that's not easy. You can't just get a flight to Coll. It takes literally 24 hours of catching various different trains, small trains, big trains, staying in a hostel overnight. I think I was 16, staying in a youth hostel by myself, not knowing anyone, to then having to catch a boat at 5 a.m. to then get over to this island. And then you stay with someone on the island for a week and they test your resilience in loads of different ways.
Totally should bring that into our intern assessment programme. Just make it, people are furrowing their brow at me, but I think that sounds like such a great self-selection mechanism as well. Because some people would go, not for me.
Yeah. So a lot of kids actually discovered during it that they like the idea of going on a gap year, but then the reality is actually something totally different for them. And for me, I think I'd always been a really quiet kid at school, and it was the first time that I discovered, wow, this is absolutely amazing. What an adventure, and really liked it. Came out of my shell. And I'd always wanted to learn a language, so I'd asked to be put in a project which would teach me Spanish or French. And they said, based on my skills and my interests and what I like, they were saying, go to Latin America, learn Spanish in Peru. And so I did.
Had that affinity with languages presented at school or not until?
No, not at all. Oh God, my French teacher hated me. I was so disruptive just because I couldn't get it. I just used to mimic sounds but not words because I was too embarrassed to pronounce the words properly. So I would mimic the tonality but then not say any words.
That's fascinating. I just naturally assumed. So how many languages can you speak now?
3.5.
3.5. How many can you sort of comprehend and pick occasional words out of? And
5 or 6.
5 or 6. Yeah. So I naturally assumed you'd always been doing that.
No.
That's fascinating. Okay. So talk to us about setting off on the gap year.
I had to raise about £4,000, which for a 17-year-old is very, very hard during A-levels. But that was through applying to foundations that support that kind of adventure experience for kids, or doing endless cake sales at school. My best one actually was I managed to write to Whight, you know, the wax company, and I said to them, I'm trying to raise money and I've got an awesome idea for how to raise money. Would you provide me with a free box of wax strips? So they were like, okay, yeah, sure. And so I got like a massive load of wax strips, and I went to an all-girls school, but my first year of sixth form, they were trialing how to basically make it into a mixed sixth form. So there were about, I don't know, 10 boys versus hundreds of girls. And so I asked all the boys whether they would, for charity, let me wax their legs in public in like the school hall assembly room. And most of them said yes. So I charged £1 per wax strip. And then I let all the girls in my school buy a wax strip and place it on their body, as mainly their legs. And
Mainly.
It's mainly their legs. And then they would like get the pleasure of basically waxing one of the new boys in our sixth form.
I mean, that's entrepreneurial, Amy, isn't it?
No, I mean, I made a lot of money for that one. So yeah, that was a good one.
Nice.
And yeah, they just test your resilience, product trust in so many different ways. So when you finally do get to go on your gap year, it's you're kind of set up basically, and they cut off pretty much all contacts when you're out there. So I was working in a I don't want to call it an orphanage because a lot of these kids had parents, but it was very backwards in terms of how they looked after their kids out there. But I was essentially there to teach them English and play with them because they didn't get much touch time or much care. Yeah, it was something like, I don't know, per 100 kids, there was 1, maybe 2 carers. So wow. I was out there supporting. I look back on this now actually, and I feel it's quite cringy telling you this because I don't like thinking about products that even exist like this, and I don't think that's the right way to provide support. But when you're a 17, 18-year-old and you're looking for an adventure and you've got no money and no means of having an adventure other than to take part in a project like this, you sign up to it. And I think it was amazing. I was working with loads of kids that just had never really played the game before, or but they were just so happy and smiley. So it was really lovely to be a part of their lives. It's very heart-wrenching when you have to say goodbye. But I guess the funny story out of all of this was I thought I was going over there to learn Spanish, and actually I ended up living in a village which spoke Quechua, which is a indigenous language in the Andean mountains, and it's a funny language. It does have Spanish mixed into it, but a lot of what I was saying was like Spanish and Quechua fusion. And so after my gap year, I started a university course, and it was geography and Spanish. And I remember getting into the first day of class and my teacher saying, right, everybody go around and introduce yourselves to your classmates. And of course that was in Spanish. And I remember saying, I can't even remember the words now, but I'd said, hi, my name is, and I'd mixed Spanish and Quechua. And a classmate had said, I think you're in the wrong language class. And I was like, this is Spanish, right? And they were like, yep. I was like, nope, definitely in the right class. And they were going, no, you're not. And it took me having to sit down with my teacher, and he said, right, let's have a little test conversation. He was like, this is not Spanish. So it's funny going from what I thought was a language I was speaking to actually it being a hybrid language.
So were you 12 months over there?
Yeah.
How did you change over that 12-month period?
Oh, a
lot?
A lot, yeah, a lot. There were very difficult situations that I had to face that were completely unpredictable. So it was just resilience building. I learned another language, whether it was
Well, two by the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So there's that, and learning to communicate in a different way. Living in Peru, they have completely different ways of operating in society. So here in the UK, we're very individualistic, whereas out there, everything's communal. So learning to, I mean, I've got lots of brothers and sisters, but learning to really share things, that was a challenge. And learning that privacy was not possible out there was difficult. Everybody knows everything about you, and that's quite scary. But it becomes interesting because then you know everything else about everyone else around you, and the bonds that you can create with people can become so much deeper than anything that I'd ever experienced growing up in the UK. So that was really interesting.
Amazing. It sounds like the year was worth many more years than if you'd done it in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this is literally like over a decade ago for me, but I'm the strongest advocate for a gap year for people that it's possible for them to do so. It's not accessible to everyone, but there are definitely schemes out there that support people.
I mean, you found a way.
Yeah.
So there's ways and means, I think. Not easy for everyone, but I think for lots of people will stop themselves at them. I'm sure it's too difficult, rather than trying to find a way, which you clearly did.
Yeah, I needed a lot of support from my parents. My mum them being musicians, they offered masterclasses as well and donated to help me get out there, because £4,000 is a lot of money to raise. I think it was more than that, 4,500, and that just seems almost impossible when you've got to raise it alongside A levels. But yeah, I think there's a lot of just having to just get on with it and do it.
Okay. So uni, geography and Spanish?
Geography and Spanish, and then that provided me with
a view to, did you know what you wanted to do at the end at that point?
No. I still don't know what I want to do.
Me neither.
When you discover.
Sometimes you have to invent a company, that helps.
I mean, maybe. I don't think I've got quite as much resilience for that as you. But...
Yet, maybe.
Yet. No, I quite like being the doer in the background. So, yeah. But so uni was geography and Spanish, and that gave me another year abroad. So I chose to I wanted to get straight back out to Latin America. Lived in Colombia for a year, which was again an incredible experience, and that was very much more by myself, no projects backing me. I went out, had to find somewhere to live and do everything by myself. Got a job with the British Council, and that again was I think this actually, I know that I was studying geography and Spanish at uni. Geography, you can relate to environmentalism, but I was looking at it really with a very social lens. So if you think about if an earthquake happened, I would be thinking, okay, how does that affect the people rather than the environmental factors that caused that? And so it was only when I was living in Colombia, I would say, it was the first time that I'd really kind of opened my eyes to thinking, oh my God, the world is changing. Climate change is a thing that actually is, for the first time, tangible to me. I was living there at a time where there were huge agrarian strikes, and I was living in Bogota, the capital city, and there were huge farmer blockades around the city. And it was the first time where we had huge electricity shortages, water shortages. People were protesting in the street every single day. And these water shortages could go on for days, and you didn't know when you would get access to water. It was realizing that you couldn't just turn on a tap and it would come out. And that had been like all of our experiences in England. And seeing people really upset about how the changing climate is affecting their crops, and relating that back to governmental policies which weren't fair for the people living that experience. So yeah, I became quite active in protesting around climate issues out there. And then after that, just kind of thought, well, I think this is the beginning of something, but I wasn't quite sure what.
Okay, so we get back, we finish uni, then what?
I got a scholarship to go and study Arabic in it felt like a military college in California for a summer, and that was.
I mean, was it a military college in?
It was full of military personnel who were wanting to learn Arabic, and the program was run like a military institution, like studying all day, so much homework. We were under a strict language pledge, which was 0 English and no other language apart from Arabic. And if they caught you speaking any other language, you would get kicked out of school. And of course, I was one of a few foreign exchange students, so there was no way I could get kicked out because I had one return ticket back at the end of the program, and that was it. So, yeah, it was pretty wild. And that is, okay, this was a really interesting thing. You know, when toddlers will say, they're like, that we have that expression of the terrible twos. And it's when they're on the precipice of being able to learn to being able to talk, but they can't quite. And they throw tantrums and they get angry, and you don't quite know why because they can't express themselves. And basically the whole of this Arabic school that I was attending, it just everyone turns into a toddler because they can't communicate what they want to say yet. You're learning a language and you just can't quite communicate, but then you're not allowed to turn into your mother tongue. So you are utterly stuck. And when you're stuck and you really need the toilet, or you're really hungry and you don't know how to ask for that, people just cry and they throw fits and they get really angry and they just storm about. And you're like, wow, these are like men in the army, and they are.
Did you have one of these
tantrums? I think my meltdowns look like just like hysterical laughter and then a few tears and then more hysterical laughter and then some more tears. It was kind of this mania that erupts, but
okay.
Yeah. And then I went to study a master's at the School of Oriental and African Studies, which is in London.
What was the title of that master's?
International Studies and Diplomacy.
I mean, what on earth do you like? What does that look like in terms of study? What did you learn?
So the reason I picked it is it's a highly practical course. So I think I'm not very good with academia, where you just have to read loads of reports and write loads of essays. And I mean, that was a heavy part of the course, don't get me wrong, but I'm a much more like practical doer person. And so this course offered modules in mediation, peace and reconciliation, speech training. We used to play this crisis game where we'd have to get together at weekends as an entire course of like 150 people and run around an ex-prison building that SOAS had taken over, and we would have to resolve big world conflicts in the setting of this building, and we'd each be given a role in advance. So it could be that I was an Afghan Taliban member, but then one of my friends was a Pakistani Taliban member. And then you realise that even though they're both Taliban, they don't have the same opinions and they don't want the same things. So you think you're on the same side as someone playing this game, and then you're not. And then there's lots of betrayal and there's lots of kind of negotiations to be had. And you're simulating real life crises and negotiation settings. It's really interesting.
Can you imagine the tutors designing that course thinking, we're totally going to do this. We need a Madam Prison, but this is going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. So anyway, I picked that course for its practicality, but also just because it gave me the opportunity to continue studying Arabic. So SOAS give you free language classes for any course that you sign up to. And it was just, I think I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but this was open enough that I could pick modules that anything that kind of was of interest to me at the time in the world.
It sounds like the social impact and the purpose bit of it was narrowing at this point, though, that each step had taken you closer towards doing something.
Yeah, I mean, this course is definitely oriented towards people who are looking to go and work for government or at the UN or anything like that. And I think actually I'd been going in that direction because my stepsister works for as a diplomat for the government, and that was a new job to her whilst I was doing my master's. And I was thinking, oh, that's really cool. And then the reality of it, when I'd gone and she was living in Jordan at the time, and I'd gone out to visit her in Jordan to practice Arabic, visit and see what was going on, and seeing all the bureaucracy and the kind of red tape that she would have to go through to make any impact happen at all. I just thought, oh my God, there's got to be a better way of working. It can't look like this.
I was asked the other day during an interview, what would I change if I ran the country? And I just wouldn't want to. Like, I kept coming back to, I don't think running a government is the way to effectively do anything anymore. I think there's so many other ways to do good stuff and have positive impact, not shackled by the systems and processes that are there. I mean, change the system would have been the first answer I had, but that's not palatable to anyone.
You're getting revolutionary here. The system.
The civil service and stuff is explicitly set up to stop anything changing. And it's just not fit for how can a system that was set up hundreds of years ago be anywhere near appropriate for what we're facing today with the speed of information and people's awareness of everything? Even the premise that one person can represent the views of several 100,000 people or millions of people in a constituency, it's just farcical. It's just not accurate anymore. Anywho, so I declined that offer to run the government that big.
Run the world.
Yeah. I will never go into politics ever. Okay, so and then what did first job look like when you finished the masters?
I had an internship with an organisation called the Anglo-Omani Society, and they are a charity that was set up with some money gifted by the Sultan of Oman, who was grateful for Britain's help in a civil war out in Oman back in the day. I say back in the day, I think it was the 70s, can't remember the exact date. So recent history, and it was formerly a bit kind of a gentleman's club, and they were trying to modernise it. They realised that people who had direct ties between Britain and Oman are basically dying and getting older, and they wanted to make sure that new diplomatic ties were being built between younger generations, so between the youth of Britain and Oman today. So that was a really interesting internship, because I got to, one, kind of relate back to my studies and Arabic and understand a new culture that I'd never engaged with before. And then second, basically they gave me a research opportunity. So they said, listen, it's unpaid internship, but we will give you one trip to go out to Oman, and you can research anything you want and of interest, and you can we'll help you set up interviews with anyone you want. And they had some really, really cool ties out there to some high up people. So I decided I wanted to look at the role of renewable energy out there. I'd seen some weird things around where they were only using renewable energies in order to frack. You think, hold on a second, that doesn't make any sense. And there's no renewables being used in domestic, or back then there weren't any renewables being used to produce domestic energy. And I was just thinking, there's a real weird kind of thing going on here. And I don't know who's thinking about it. It's not really being talked about. Why aren't we talking about this as a society? That scared me. So I got to go and talk to some big oil bosses out in Oman, big energy bosses, and ask them all about what they saw the future of renewables being in Oman. So that was really cool.
The question of, so you described that was an unpaid internship. Question, should unpaid internships exist as things?
No, realistically, I mean, it's very old-fashioned to think that people can afford to take unpaid internships. Like right now, we've got a cost of living crisis. Jobs are super competitive. You need experience, and so people will take unpaid internships. But is that fair? Absolutely not. I mean, everyone needs to make a living. I was really scraping by, and I could have asked for help from my parents, I guess, if I was really struggling. But there's a sense of pride in doing that I didn't want to go there. And I ended up taking another job alongside it, which almost broke me, just to work what I really wanted to do. And that kind of sacrifices your real learning opportunities. So if you're just working yourself to a bone before you've even began, just to try and get a foot in the door, to me it's...
I struggle with it. So we do not offer unpaid internships. I have done them, and I don't know what the right answer is, because I think not if a business cannot afford to provide a paid internship, then that cuts off an opportunity that someone could do. And I kind of think it's not my place to make the choice for someone else. So having done it myself, I feel like a hypocrite to say, and regularly we get asked, can I come and do an internship with you? Oh no, I don't need paying. Sorry, we don't offer that. We have an intern program that is paid. And I don't know if it's the right answer. I totally hear and agree with what you're saying, that there's an unfairness. I think there's lots of unfairnesses out there, that some people have opportunities and others don't. I also think people tend to find a way. Like when I did it, I worked in a steelworks labouring for an extended period, and the last week I would do the internship or alongside work in terms of doing that to find a way, because I couldn't afford to do it in that regard and couldn't afford a gap year. Well, I could have found a way if I knew how to do it, or did what you did and was proactive enough to find a way, but I wasn't mature enough to do it when I was 18. Definitely not. So I still keep coming back to, I don't know if it's the right answer. I don't think as a company we could offer it, because I think we'd be open to a huge amount of criticism, because you don't get the opportunity to have a long form conversation. Someone would go, well, you're hiring unpaid internships, you're managing a huge amount of money, and you've got a big land holding. That's outrageous. Whereas I think it is more nuanced and more complicated, and I want people to have opportunities to learn, but we can't take an unlimited amount. We had 455 applicants for internships. A number of those said, well, I don't need paying, can I come? And we said, no, I'm sorry, you can't. But I still don't know if that was the right answer or not. My view is always the same doesn't mean fair, and giving people the choice of an opportunity is a good idea. But right now I don't feel able to offer an unpaid internship. So people that keep offering, thank you, but we can't do it at the moment. We love that you want to come and work with us. Please look out for our paid intern programs that are there. So we move past that chapter onto your first job after the internship.
Yeah, which was... Oh my gosh, I've had quite a...
You'd have to do them all.
Yeah.
Like,
I worked for a refugee charity. I did Arabic translation and supported unaccompanied minors who had just arrived into the UK.
Wow.
So it would be literally police picking them up from their journeys over from Calais that had just made it over to the UK, and they'd pick them up and go, God, don't know what to do with these children. So they would just kind of dump them on the charity doorstep and say, you can help them. And so we were working really ridiculous hours and trying to get just the services that you would expect would be really easily provided, because they're basic needs support to everyone, and yet getting it to unaccompanied minors who didn't even know how to look after themselves properly was just impossible. So getting them registered at doctors, or getting them into education, or everything was so hard, finding them accommodation. And when they don't have carers, don't speak English, and you don't understand the traumas that they've been through to get to the UK, that was quite a harrowing job. I didn't last in that one long. I think I was there a year and a half, and it broke me.
I was about to ask, how do you carry that weight and go home and not just be in that constant loop of seeing it and feeling it? I guess you don't.
No, you don't. Well, in charities that are really overstretched, they don't have the services to be able to provide mental health support to their staff. But that, in an ideal situation, is exactly what you would be given. You'd be given some sort of therapy or additional support as a worker to support these children. But I mean, I remember not even being given a work phone, but having to communicate with all of these unaccompanied minors who had just arrived into the UK with my personal phone to try and sort out services for them, or meet up with them so that we could take them to the Home Office. And then, of course, all these kids have your number, and when they're lonely, they call you, and it ends up crossing into your personal life. It's really, really hard. I mean, my mum had to step in quite a few times and provide meals and make sure these kids were okay, because there was a point where I couldn't come home and know that I just left them. So that was very makeshift. I wonder if that charity's still going. But yeah, that was hard. Didn't last there that long, and then got a cool job with a kind of social impact consultancy. So I was working there for 3 years. and you become a pseudo expert in everything when you're a consultant. You kind of Google becomes your best friend, and you are spread across everything. And the more social impact projects I did, the more I was gravitating towards the environmental ones and going, oh God, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to be doing. And it got to a point where I just didn't want to do anything else, and thought I need to move in-house somewhere that is really focusing on environmental impact. So that was the end of that chapter, and that takes me to Oxygen House.
Perfect. Let's hear about how you found Oxygen House and that process.
Bit random, just used a green jobs website. I think it literally is called greenjobs.co.uk. Do you know the one? And I remember thinking there's a job for the Dixon Foundation, which is a family foundation that were saying that they were giving grants to environmental charities. And I remember thinking, okay, that's cool. That's roughly along the directions of my next step. I don't really know what I want my next step to look like, but it's environmental. That's cool. And I remember seeing it's based in Exeter. And then I looked at where in Exeter, and it wasn't just in Exeter, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's an Exeter business park. But I remember thinking, God, I don't drive. And I live in London, and how's that going to work? And should I apply? And randomly, my godmother lives in Totnes, and I kind of thought, well, maybe this could work if I go and hang out with her a little bit. And then
there's such a story of each of these chapters of you going, I could find a way.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I can do that. I can find a way. I'll make it work. I'll make it work. I'll make it work. Finding ways to say yes and going for things.
Well, yeah, I was really curious about this role because there just wasn't much information about it. And I think I'd gone through the application process and just thought, this is quite fun. Sorry.
You're okay. Just do rock and roll and they'll deal with it.
Got distracted. And then I remember kind of challenging the job role a bit and thinking, that
doesn't sound like you, Amy.
But I remember thinking, I don't think they want that. And I don't think they know what they need for their staff member. And asking them, they said, oh no, we don't really know what we're looking for. Tell us. And I kind of pitched a job that I did want. And they were like, great.
I love that. I loved you having the bravery, confidence, like awareness. And if you go back through each of those different steps and experience, you would have seen a lifetime of experiences in a really short period at the start of your career, allowing you to be able to make that sort of challenge, which was authentically you, genuinely trying to help them find the right thing they wanted. But that's the right way to engage with the process. Be authentically you, decide what is it that I would want to do. And again, you could have just let that go by, but you said, nope, I'm going to try and fix that and make it better and help with it. And it ended up with you joining OH.
Yeah, it's funny because you make it sound very like fancy and like it was great skill, but it really wasn't. I mean, it felt very random to me, to be honest. And when I get very strong gut feelings, and it was just one of those things where it's like, just go for it. And it was under lockdown, and I'd made the really brave decision to quit my job under lockdown, which was absolutely terrifying. And then you think, oh my God, am I ever going to get a job under COVID ever again? And so I think this feeling like a really random decision that could send me on a completely different path. It's lockdown, and if it doesn't work out, things work online anyway. Just got to go for it.
Do you think, I mean, it's that the level of travel and the breadth of experiences, you talked about first seeing climate change. Do you think that has fundamentally shaped your understanding of environmental and social issues now? And if you hadn't have had those experiences, it would be totally different?
Yeah, 100%. I think the fact that I was privileged to experience living in Latin America and living there, but also being able to travel a little bit on my holidays. And I was doing very slow forms of travel. And so it really allows you to see things at their real production value, if that makes sense. So, for example, I was seeing all of these amazing skirts being produced, which were kind of a traditional skirt that had been worn in Peru for a really, really long time. And just to produce one skirt, the amount of skill, craft, time to cultivate the wool that was used, and I mean, these skirts take like a full year to produce in terms of just weaving alone. And then you're thinking about the life of the animal that went to producing that wool. You really see how things get produced, the time, valuing things differently in terms of financial value. And we don't have any access, or at least growing up in London, if you want something, you just buy it and then it's there. It's like quick. You think Amazon Prime and the things arrive the next day. So you don't get a sense of what it takes to actually grow your food. Like I've started growing a load of fruit and vegetables in my garden. Oh my God, who knew it was so difficult to grow like random veggies that I would just pick up on a daily basis? Or I don't know, like my chard is taking so long to grow. I'm so frustrated. Why is it so long? And you could just buy it at the supermarket, and most people don't think about that kind of start to finish process. And I think living abroad, that where things were valued differently and where raw materials are produced and then turned into something magical out there, and then we only see the end product over here, just gave me a completely different view on how to value things and how to see them.
So when you work with the Dixon Foundation, you got to work with some really cool grantees and companies. What stands out as the ones that you sort of smile and think, I really enjoyed that one, that one was really cool?
They were all pretty cool. And the nice thing was I got a real nice influence in which organisations we wanted to support. But one that stands out recently actually is an organisation called Coral Maker. So they are trying to save rare dying out species of corals by producing these stone skeletons. So they use AI and robotics to create these skeletons and then plug all of these really rare dying out corals that they've managed to harvest and take cuttings of, and plug them using robots into all of these skeletons and then embed them back into the sea to scale coral regeneration. So that, I mean, was magical to me, especially as I saw bleached corals for the first time ever last year on a holiday and was totally shocked by it. It was really scary. And then seeing people actually do something about that is amazing. I think that we're privileged in the UK. We've got a particularly vibrant charity sector and people who really care and people who are very, very, very dedicated to what the issues they're trying to tackle. So that it's not about like finding organisations. There are too many organisations to support, but it's like how you go about doing that, how you go about making an impact, especially with a limited pot, and how can you even begin to tackle gnarly changes to very, very complex systems that have existed since colonial rule, essentially, and it's incredibly hard. When
you were describing that project, which sounds uber cool, I could just imagine Emily talking about how much she loved that one. So shout out to Emily if you're listening. Philanthropy. We've talked about this before, and you just described there's so many amazing organisations doing lots of good stuff. I spent a lot of time working with wildlife trusts and rivers trusts and woodland trusts, and I think they've achieved a huge amount and have fought back incredibly hard against governments and large businesses and industry that is damaging the environment. From your experience of seeing all these different organisations, what would you articulate as the sort of advantages but also the limitations of a philanthropic-based approach? Yeah,
it's hard. There are so many different pros and cons. I guess the advantages is that with private money, private wealth, you can move really fast. So you can mobilize capital really quickly. You can take risks on that capital. Lots of people, if you compare it to businesses, don't want to take a huge amount of risk with businesses because, I mean, there are huge consequences of that and the people that you employ, blah, blah, blah. But with philanthropy, there's less, they are in a fortunate position to be able to take more risk and it have less impact on their personal lives.
Yeah, it can be really passion-driven, can't it?
Yeah, and I think the greatest opportunity, which I was beginning to see and have really interesting conversations around with other high net worth individuals, was this kind of, I guess, a triangle between spend on grants, for example, investments, whether that be supporting social enterprises, or the investments where they hold and grow their wealth, and then tax. And where philanthropists are thinking about their entire wealth portfolio and exactly where all of their money sits, and not thinking just about providing grants here and there, but thinking, how can my investments make a difference long term? Am I being taxed correctly? There are amazing campaigns as well that come out of high net worth saying, we're not being taxed enough. And that's great to me, because they're trying to change a system that is inherently unfair. So there's patriotic millionaire.
Julia,
yeah,
she's coming on soon.
Is she? Oh, awesome. And
my only challenge with that is, so the concept, I totally applaud what she's trying to do. I just hear back, I don't trust the government to use that tax efficiently or effectively.
Yeah, and so this is a conversation we had a lot, and we used to sit in a room, and it was interesting because I'd have these conversations with next gen wealth holders who either had just come into being able to control their wealth, or who would come in to controlling wealth in the future, and were beginning to prepare around how to kind of deploy that wealth fairly. And actually, if you look at true spend figures, government per government, the kind of top line cost of how much it takes to run the NHS, or how much an educational system costs, they're the same figure. They don't change, right? So if you're voting Labour or you're voting Conservative in this country, the NHS costs what the NHS costs, right? So they fundamentally have to give like a kind of minimum to be able to keep it running. And same with our educational system. The governments can then decide how much additional they want to allocate, but there's a kind of baseline spend which they can't really change those figures much. So if you were actually to look at the budgets year on year, government by government, there's not a huge amount of change there. It's about ideology, communications, how they put that out. It's about the much smaller policies that they fight over in government that actually don't affect the vast majority of people, yet people create an incredible opposition and contention in society and spread hate. So that's where, in my mind, when you're talking about tax, there needs to be an element of education over what are the budgets in government and how much they actually get over flexibility of the budgets they create.
That makes sense. Shifting topic ever so slightly. So you've had lots of different adventures along the way, experienced tons of different countries, and clearly learnt tons and experienced tons, and had an amazing experience doing that. This is something I grapple with personally. How do you balance having those experiences and knowing the impact of the actual act of travelling? How do you feel about that? Because I struggle with it.
Oh, I struggle too. I haven't stopped travelling, and I still take long haul flights, and it's something that I think about all the time. But I think at the moment I'm trying to think about, if I take a flight, what is the impact that I'm going to be having in terms of on the local community? Where am I staying? Am I supporting ecotourism rather than run-of-the-mill tourism? Am I having an adventure that will really kind of raise my spirits, give me energy, rejuvenate me if I'm feeling super burnt out? Am I engaging with nature? That's super critical to me, is being in nature and continuing to form bonds and connections with it, because I'm out of the loop in London. So thinking of ways that I can travel easily. Unfortunately for me, like traveling in the UK, it's really expensive. And actually sometimes it's much easier to go abroad. I would be interested to hear what you think about it.
Try and avoid the flights as much as possible. Acknowledge that when they do happen, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. Feel very guilty about it. Ultimately, I have a tally of my personal carbon footprint that I haven't got the right project to offset it with yet. We won't do it with ourselves because it's marking your own homework. but having the right one that is of a level, then we're going to do that. The one that I really grapple with is, so that my son and daughter are of an age where they want to see things, and like I want to take them to Disney World. I never went as a kid, couldn't do that. Fortunate to be in a position where I can give them those opportunities. I want them to see it, and they shouldn't have to not see it because of the decisions my generation's made about the planet.
Okay.
So I need to find a way to square it and make it work, but it is one that I feel unbelievably hypocritical about. A lot of our work on a day-to-day basis, we either travel electric vehicles where we can, or groups of us travel together to be as efficient as possible on sites where it's just not feasible to get an electric vehicle to. So I'm comfortable with doing that as efficiently as we can now, but it all needs to improve. And like marginal gains, though, iterative steps along the way, we'll get there. But yeah, and it's not just the two of us. Everyone I talk to about this has the same challenges and difficulties and tries to avoid flying as much as they can and as much as possible.
Yeah, I had this conversation recently with Matt Gingell, and his idea was quite interesting. He was like, "Oh, you deserve a free pass when you're young, when you're in those kind of informative years of learning, and you need these experiences to create your values and solidify what you want to do in the world, and hopefully it will inspire you to make an impact and preserve what you see or regenerate what you see is not there." And then once those opinions are formulated and you're steadily on your way, that's when you need to really kind of
clear that debt.
Yeah.
And make a net positive approach.
Exactly.
I think that's a lovely way to wrap up the second part of the podcast, Amy. I'm so excited as you sort of start the new role and continue doing that at Auction House that can bring you back and do a part 2 of your podcast and hear about the next big adventure. But what a journey you've had so far. Thank you so much for coming. Bye, guys.